my parents called me Dick, and I went by Dick for 45, 50 years. And as you can imagine, as time went on, that became a difficult name to live with. It's not the kind of thing where you go to a meeting and they'd give you a hello, my name is sticker for your jacket, or you ordering at Starbucks. And so
was that an issue all the way through, or did that become more apparent as?
Yeah, I think with every Judd Apatow movie, it just became more and more difficult to have that name. And so I thought I really I should do something about this. I need a rebranding. And then it all sort of came together one day, about maybe almost 10 years ago, where a dear friend of mine, I'm a huge, or at the time, I was a huge Meatloaf fan. Bat out of hell,
Singer.
Yeah, 300 pounds, sweaty, long, stringy hair. And so,
yeah, I can see what.
Yeah, and I knew every word to every song. Huge fan. And so my producer, who's English, Fiona Forsyth, she said, "Well, I know Meatloaf. If you'd like to see him in concert, let's do that." So we went together, and I was in my element. I was, in a crowd of my peeps, singing every word to every song. And then she said, "Would you like to meet him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I would love to meet Meatloaf." And so she took me backstage after the concert, and she said, "Meet, I'd like you to, meet someone. He's a huge fan. He's got the album, he's got the cassette, he had the disc, and he knows every word to every song. He's a huge fan. This is my friend Dick." And Meatloaf looks at me and goes, "What the hell kind of fucked up name is Dick?" And then I realized when a guy who's named Meatloaf is making fun of your name, it's probably time to change. And so I sent out an email the next day to all my friends and said, this name has been a pebble in my shoe all my life. So from now on, please call me Rick.
Wow. So you weren't tempted to hit back. Obviously, he's called Meatloaf, and your friend was calling him. Was she calling him Meat for short? Like that's an exception.
Yeah. No, Meatloaf does go by Meat to his friends. Yeah.
Meat to his friends. And he thought your name was weird. That's amazing. I don't know anyone who's switched names midway. I presumed it was your director, because obviously it's later. Rick comes up, and I thought he's probably directing under Rick to sort of throw off, so that you can do, Burger King as well as Jack.
No, it wasn't anything quite that strategic. But when I sent out the email and told colleagues and friends, I was surprised by the number of people who wrote back to me and said, "I know you know me as Mike, but my real name is Francis." Or it was way more common that I.
Oh, really? Oh, they opened up to you? I thought they were going to be joking.
No.
Yeah, okay. But none of them. But they did it secretly. You were very public the way you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That must have caused some sort of problems with having a Rick/Dick catalog of different things.
I sort of left problems. Yeah, no, it was like I said, it was like taking a pebble out of my shoe that had been there for 50 years.
So you feel more at one with yourself now?
Yeah. It's a non-issue.
Good. Right. So I've got a list of questions here that I'll refer to now and again in case I got stuck to give some sort of context when we get into the sort of hardcore work. So, so where did you grow up, Rick?
So I grew up in a little suburb south of Chicago, which is the Midwest, the middle of the country, called Park Forest. And it was the kind of place built after World War II for returning GIs, where every house or every house was basically the same, painted a slightly different color, and it was very very normal and typical.
Is that the kind of thing that turns up in John Hughes films? I've got limited reference of America. All the cliches.
Yeah, but you're close. But the John Hughes films all took place in much nicer neighborhoods.
Yeah, they all seem like mansions.
Yeah.
When the kids go home, it's like 10-bedroom blocks that they all have their park in.
Yeah.
And as a child, were you creative? Did you do creative things? Paint, draw?
I wouldn't say that I was creative, but I was always curious. I remember I would watch like kids' TV shows, and it might be a woman reading a book to 5 kids or something and talking about it. And I remember thinking, I was curious about what happens behind the scenes. I was aware that I was watching something. I was watching a program, but I knew that there had to be a lot of other stuff happening behind the scenes to make it happen.
The family or the production of the TV thing?
Well, yeah, like who thought of this idea, and why did they make this lady the face of the program, and why is she dressed like that, and why does the set look like that, and so I was always curious about what's going on behind the scenes, and I asked my parents if they could. I wanted to be on that show. It was like a little local TV show. And so I was like 5, 6 years old, and I got on the show, and I wore my Sunday best clothes, and all I could do during the show was sit in the chair and point at like where I see the camera. I can see that camera.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. And so I wouldn't say that I was always creative, but I was curious.
That's quite an unusual trait. Were you an introvert or an extrovert? Do you think? I'm just thinking that sort of thoughtful observation sounds like an introvert, which I probably would be. But I'm only basing on the other side. I've seen that picture of you dancing around in the 80s, like Huey Lewis, and you don't look like an introvert in that picture.
I think I've looked into this a little bit because I think that I'm an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert. I'm not the guy who at the convention is walking around and shaking hands and inviting people to play golf.
Yeah,
that's not my skill. But once I'm in a situation, a smaller group of people, I feel super comfortable. So hence the 1980s dance party on the set of a shoot.
Yeah, looks good. It's so. I'm going to use that as the header for this. It's so 80s. I can't really pin it down, but that just you don't see pictures like that from shoots anymore. I don't know whether. I mean, you've got braces on. I can't remember whether you've got a mullet or someone's got a mullet, maybe.
Kind of. Yeah.
But it's just. I don't know. It just seems like. Well, again, it's sort of John Hughesy, Huey Lewis and the Newsy. I don't know. They're the sort of all things that come up from that one simple picture.
Yeah, so I'm there with my art director, Rick Carpenter, and the photographer, David Leach, and we were doing a shoot for public broadcasting, and it was for ballet, program coming up. And so the ballet dancer was just the epitome of refinement and grace and polish. And we just wanted to commemorate the moment, so we just jumped in and started dancing, just goofing around. And
how did she react? Did she freak out, or was she?
No, she was fine with it, and I think I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I think that's an example of contrast and conflict making something interesting.
Yeah.
Because the three of us dancing by ourselves would have been weird, and
Yeah,
her by herself would have been elegant, but throwing the two things together is what makes it interesting.
absolutely. So I read I read a good quote that said that you said your dad was a funny guy trapped in an unfunny job for 40 years. That sounds like that had a big effect on the rest of your career, possibly life.
Yes, that's wow. You've done your homework. My my dad was a funny guy, and he sold window coverings.
Right.
And I don't think that it was a different generation. I don't think he grew up thinking I have a passion for selling window coverings, but he had 4 kids, and you just do what you have to do there were no lifestyles back then. There was just life. And so he did what he had to do. And my mom was a teacher, and my dad was funny. He had a very dry wit. My mom thought she was funny, but wasn't, which is the worst kind.
Yeah.
Taught me a lesson about you better like what you do. It's better to go through life liking what you do and being happy.
So did you think at the time that humor you could make money from humor, either his or yours or someone? Because obviously most of your stuff is funny, genuinely funny, rather than advertising funny.
Well, thank you.
But did you back then do you think he could use his humor in another way, or did you not see it as something you could make money on?
No, in the little town that I grew up in, the richest guy in town owned one McDonald's store.
Right.
And most of my friends, my best friend, his dad was the manager of a paint store, and my dad sold window coverings, and I had no inkling that you could make a living, being funny. I thought work is just something that you do to support your family and grin and bear it.
Were you rebellious before you were in advertising? Because I think a lot of your work's quite rebellious and challenging. Doesn't follow the norm.
Well, no, I was not rebellious. Quite the opposite. I got along great with my teachers growing up, and I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I think I grew up kind of fast and matured quickly. I remember my mother, being a teacher, had some books in the basement about child development, child psychology, and I was reading those books as a child. And so, but what the combination of being disciplined and being funny, I think, is ideally suited to a career in advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are creative people in advertising, but the clients, we all work for clients, and the clients tend to be disciplined, and they have business degrees, and so there's this ideological gap between the the artsy fartsy artists on one side and the thoughtful, serious, risk averse clients on the other. And so, those two groups never hung out together in college. One group was playing Frisbee with dogs in the quad, and the other group was studying to get their MBA. And then in advertising, these two groups are thrown together, and you have to be able to, if you can understand the client's business issues, so that they trust you, and if you can show that you're creative and can think unconventionally and support unconventional ideas and have the creative people have your trust, that's what I think a good creative director is. And the example of that is Lee Clow from Chiat. He was very influential on me.
In what sense? That he understands the business very well?
Well, in every sense. I mean, Lee is a guy who looks like Jesus in sandals and shorts, and and so he looks very creative, and creative people look at him as an iconoclast and a rebel. And then when he speaks to clients, he has his business acumen is terrific, and his ability to take complex problems and sort of hone them down to simple ideas is very impressive to the business, to the client side. He was a master at that.
It's interesting. I interviewed someone else who used to work for Lee, who said, "Don't be fooled by that sort of, bumbling Jesus-y, beardy thing." I don't think he called him a savage, but it was something like that. He said he's very, very tough. He's not as cozy and woolly as he looks, which is you're sort of saying a similar thing.
Well, I wouldn't say that he's a tough savage.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what the description was. It wasn't as harsh as savage, but it was basically that if you only see him in pictures, you imagine he bumbles around and just pats people on the back, and he's very easygoing and may get rolled by people. But I think he was sort of saying he's very sharp and he's tough. He's not as you may imagine, I think was his point. He was saying it in a positive way rather than critical, but he's as anyone is. He's obviously at his level, which there aren't many people. Nobody's that sort of easygoing and.
I would say he's very disciplined in his pursuit of being creative.
Obviously, it's interesting you say about relating to clients. You've got this sort of thinking different and being creative on the one side, and then understanding on the business side. You obviously did a finance degree, which is unusual for any creative. In fact, I don't know I've interviewed any creatives who've done a business degree, finance degree.
Yeah.
So obviously you went off on a different track. That sounds like that's probably been really useful in retrospect, even though it was completely unplanned. Or it was planned.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, coming from where I came from, the idea of doing anything creative for a living just wasn't that wasn't a possibility. I wasn't even aware of it. But when I went to college, I took, as part of my business studies, we spent a week studying marketing. And as part of that class, we had an assignment to create our own print ad. And so I dove into that and really loved it. But this is great. I don't know exactly what this is, but I really enjoy this. And so I went.
What did you love about that? What was the thing that you loved? Expressing yourself or solving the problem? Or
it was both. It was solving the business problem and doing something that would catch someone's attention and make them think or smile or whatever. But I really gravitated towards it. And so I went to the professor after class and I said, "Hey, I really like advertising." And he said, "Well, what's your?" And I'd like to think about maybe a career in that. And he said, "Well, what's your major?" And I said, "Finance." And he said, "What year are you?" I said, "I'm a third year junior." And he goes, "Oh, it's too late." And so, and then oddly enough, about 5 or 6 years later, I came back as a vice president over at Chiat and did a lecture for his class.
For his class?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it turned out it wasn't too late.
No, it wasn't too late.
Did he remember any of those conversations or not? He must have done.
He did not. He did when he
Did you remind him?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then also in between those two things, you worked for ExxonMobil selling engine oil to dealers. So what did you learn from that you've applied to advertising? Because I have come across lots of very good creative people who've had actual jobs in sales, and it's helped them understand how you actually sell things rather than how you come up with cool stuff?
Well, yeah, that was my first job out of college, and I needed a job. I needed to make some money, and so I took this job with mobile, and and so what it was is it was just being a salesman, and I was kind of a smart aleck, and so as punishment, they gave me the worst territory in Los Angeles. It was Compton, Inglewood, the kind of place where this is the kind of place where mobile oil dealers would carry pistols in their belts because it's a dangerous place. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And what I learned.
So did you carry a pistol?
I did not carry a pistol. No.
Compton sounds scary, particularly then.
Yes, very. It was no joke. And so I did that for a little over a year. And, I had like 1.5 wool suits driving around Compton in a shitty car, talking to dealers who were just trying to survive. And after a little over a year, I just quit. I couldn't do it anymore. And it taught me, it was valuable because it taught me what I didn't want to do. And what I didn't want to do was wear a suit. And I didn't want to be judged on something as objective as sales. You either make your quota or you don't.
Yeah.
And so I just quit. I was unemployed. And I had, I remember I had $16 to my name because I tried to pull $20 out of an ATM, and it showed me my balance was 16. Yeah. So that was.
So at this point, pre-advertising, had you seen any advertising? What ads were you aware of, or what ads did you like, or anything appeal to you at the time growing up?
No, I wasn't a student of advertising. I certainly wasn't aware of the advertising industry. And except for that little brush that I had in college with a print assignment, I didn't know anything about advertising. But it changed. It was just a fluke. When I quit my job, I eventually had to move out of my apartment because I was broke. And so the guy, it was a little single, studio apartment. And so the guy moving in was named Bud. And as I was moving out, he said, "I'm going to throw a little party here, Friday, if you want to come on over." I'm like, okay, I got nothing else to do. And so I went to this like housewarming party in my ex apartment, Bud's party. And he was in advertising. He was an account guy. And everyone at the party was in advertising. And I thought, these people are really fun. They seem to be having a good time. And there's a lot of laughter. And so I said, how do you get into advertising? And they go, well, it depends. Do you want to be an account person? I didn't know what any of this stuff meant. I go, I want to think of the ads. And they go, oh, well, you should, put together a portfolio. Maybe go to school at night and put together a portfolio. And so I borrowed, some money from my parents, and I went to a once a week portfolio school at night, put together a portfolio, and
who would have taught you there?
Yeah.
Sorry, Rick. Who would have taught you there? Would that be practicing people who are in advertising, or older people who used to be in advertising?
No, practicing people who were in advertising. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mostly like 27-year-old guys looking to find 22-year-old girls. And there was no internet then, so I literally knocked on doors. Look up in the phone book where different agencies were and knock on doors to try to get someone to take a look. And so eventually a little agency called John Brown, who did dealer advertising for Mitsubishi cars. Imagine how small that amount was. He goes, I'll hire you. And
Based on your portfolio, or based on that you had a certain amount of chutzpah just turning up and knocking?
I think my portfolio, but maybe, well, I think my portfolio. And then I go back to my crappy apartment, and I get a phone call, and he goes, "Hey, I can't hire you. You've got zero experience. I can't. It just doesn't make sense." And so I said, "I tell you what, I'll come in. I'll work for free. Just let me come in and work for free. And if I do anything that you like, then you can pay me." And so I went in for a couple of days, and he paid me $100 a day, which was a fortune.
It's a lot then, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was the start. I worked for free, and then he hired me.
So you were writing Mitsubishi dealer ads?
Yeah, and radio. Yeah, glamorous.
Excellent. Yeah, but I think it's interesting, people who start out in bad places, because I think you look at the good places and wonder how they manage to do work that's so different from where you are. At least that's what it was like for me. So how long were you there for?
Oh, probably, I don't know, probably 6 months. I hopped around pretty quickly, pretty fast. I had to have a job. I worked at Ogilvy and Mather for 5 months.
In LA?
In LA. I was at Doyle Dane. I was at Daly and Associates for 5 weeks.
Right.
So, yeah.
And Doyle Dane, did they have an LA branch? Yeah, they did, didn't they?
Yeah.
They used to in LA.
Yeah.
How long were you there for, DDB?
I was there for just over a year. Like I said,
and how was that?
I would kind of I would jump at an opportunity to do better work somewhere else, and so I hopped around quite a bit.
And did you do any work in any of those agencies up to DDB that you thought, actually, that's really good? That's more than just doing something that's covering my salary. That could be really good.
Probably not, because I can't remember any of it. So I'm going to say no. Maybe.
Did you meet anyone who inspired you in that period up to DDB, who you thought he's good, or someone who took you under their wing?
There was an associate creative director named John Armistead, who he kept moving to different agencies, and every time he moved, he would offer me a job to join him. And there was a writer named Jackie Sasson, who was a machine. You get an assignment at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock he had 45 ideas. And I just thought, oh my God, that's amazing. And I think he taught me to don't think that any idea is too precious. You're going to have to do a lot of them. So get used to the idea of seeing them killed.
Well, that's a good lesson. Also, it's good to see someone produce a lot, because often you find some creatives are so precious that they'll do one idea and feel like they need to sleep for a couple of hours to recover.
Well,
so just seeing someone endlessly produce things, you think, humans can do this. It's not impossible.
Yeah. Also, it's one thing to defend an idea, but and I was guilty of this too. The fighting for an idea, I think, is born of insecurity, because you think, this is my only idea. I don't know if I could come up with another idea, and so you fight like hell. Yeah. And it takes time to figure out and have the confidence that you have more than one idea in you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. So around this time, I've got to ask about comedy. So what comedy films or shows were you taking in? I presume all this stuff comes in and it comes out later. What were you interested in comedy at the time? Were you watching Woody Allen or I'm trying to think what would have been around. Cheers, or what were you loving?
There's a movie with Charles Grodin called The Heartbreak Kid, which I
Yeah.
thought was hilarious. I watched it recently. It doesn't really hold up over time. It's the editing is so painfully slow, but I thought The Heartbreak Kid was the funniest thing ever. Also, Spinal Tap.
Yeah, Spinal Tap's amazing.
Yeah, I would say that was kind of the gold standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you get into Della Femina Travisano? Was that just after DDB?
Yeah. Again, my the creative director John Armistead moved to Della Femina.
Okay.
And asked me to join him. So
How was that the first very? I suppose DDB is pretty creative. Obviously, the LA bit may be slightly different from New York, but was that the best place you'd been to at that point? I guess it must have been.
Yes, for sure.
And did it feel different? Because obviously, Jerry is known as certainly over here, as a very flamboyant figure.
Yeah.
He's unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jerry, the joke in the office was people, when Jerry would be asked, where do you get your ideas from? The answer would be overnight in the mail from LA. Yeah. So he's very flamboyant, but that's the execution of his brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what did you have to adapt to what you'd learned to that point to fit in or to do work that seemed appropriate then, or was it
No.
Did you just feel like you were doing what you're doing?
No, it's very the advertising in LA is way different than New York or Chicago or what I imagine London to be. It's very loose and I think egalitarian and not filled with the political infighting. LA is just more relaxed in general, and so there'd be an assignment, and you'd work on the assignment, and then somebody would pick the best idea, and then that was it. But there was no like sending flowers to the manager of the creative department to see if you could get a good assignment, or it just wasn't any of that stuff.
No, sure. So what was the first good ad you did at Della Femina? The first one that got you in a position to get the Joe Isuzu brief, or was that the first one?
No, it was Joe Isuzu. There was a writer named Matt Bogan who did the first Joe Isuzu, concept, and then that became the campaign for Isuzu, and I ended up writing a lot of them. And I would say the one where Joe Isuzu he asks the camera, how fast is the Isuzu Impulse, and he takes out a Colt 45 handgun, shoots it, goes over the car, races the bullet, beats the bullet,
and catches it in his teeth.
Yeah,
amazing. So is that the first one you did, or that's one of them?
That's the first one that I remember. Yeah,
and I read about the Joe Isuzu that initially it was based on a sketch from SNL with, I can't remember his name.
John Lovett.
John Lovett.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that David Leisure seems so much better than John Lovett. I think someone may have tried to get John Lovett and he wouldn't do it, but David Leisure he's just unbelievably oily and amazing.
Yeah, David Leisure. He's handsome enough to look like a TV presenter, but extra smarmy.
Yeah, I suppose that's what it is. John Lovett wouldn't have been handsome. You couldn't imagine him being a spokesman. He's not that handsome, slick guy. Whereas, Leisure is amazing.
Yeah.
So, how did that start to go down when you start? Obviously, how quickly did that take off as something that started to get in newspapers and on TV, getting PR rather than
really
just there?
Yeah, really quickly, because car advertising didn't look like that, and it was very kind of staid and conventional, and aspirational people in aspirational settings and that kind of thing, and music of the moment, wardrobe of the moment. And so it was, I think it's a little derivative of the early Burnback work about Think Small and Lemon. Like who comes out and completely expressly comes out against what convention is. And so obviously Volkswagen was the ultimate example of that. But to come out and say we're lying was, I think, really, really funny and refreshing. And Isuzu had to do something like that because they were such a small player in the American automobile market that they didn't have the media to get any attention. So they had to do something outlandish to get attention. And the thought was, well, maybe if we say that we're lying, people with a wink, people will understand that we're not actually lying, that you can believe the grandiose lies that we tell are obvious, but maybe that reveals a good spirit. And
how did the client receive that? Because it's not every client that would think, okay, so we're going to have a spokesman who just tells lies, who's just tells lies all the time.
Here's the thing I've learned about what makes there's two kinds of good clients, I think. One are the people who will naturally think unconventionally. So that would be Steve Jobs at Apple and Richard Branson and Phil Knight at Nike. And that represents about 0.01% of all the clients out there. So good luck finding that.
Yeah.
But the other people that make really good clients are businesses that are in trouble. They're on fire. And if they don't do something drastic, they're going to go out of business. And when you're comfortable, you make comfortable decisions. And when you're panicked, you take risks. So Isuzu had not much to lose. They were, the 11th most popular car company in the United States. And that's not sustainable, as we would say today. So they were open to that. Yeah, let's get some attention. So those are good clients. And Jack in the Box was the same way. They had just killed six people in Seattle. They were spiraling. Their business was kind of spiraling around the drain. And so when we came in and said, yeah, your spokesman is a normal guy with a giant plastic head. He's a clown, but he doesn't know that he's a clown. He's just normal. And he's come back. He's your mascot. And he's come back to take back the business from the idiots who killed people.
Yeah.
They're just, so those are.
It's interesting. Yeah. How many how much great work has come from clients on the brink of, even Apple as well, on the brink of collapse. So it's a weird business, isn't it? Advertising, where they need to be on the verge of bankruptcy to approve work that helps them.
Yeah, well, but it's true in life in general. Nobody takes drastic. No, people are kind of risk averse in general, and when things are going smoothly, no one's really in the mood to take risks. But you'll change your mind if if you're threatened, you're feeling,
But obviously, the biggest risk is not getting noticed. Is your ads not getting noticed, which people seem fine with, if things are okay. But.
Well, that's a really interesting and fundamental insight. That advertising is persuasion. That's it. And you can't persuade someone if they're not engaged with you. You can put a message out, but if no one hears it or sees it, it's pointless. And so, I like to say that customers, they can't have a preference if they don't see a difference. And differentiation is everything. And the reason that it's rare is because clients are trained business people, and they believe in things like best practices. And so best practices means take a look at what's been done, and the thing that's been done the best, repeat that. And that is that may be fine if you're talking about, how to move cans along a conveyor belt and the most efficient way, but it's a horrible way to approach marketing.
In what sense? Because you could use that as an argument to sell in work and to say the best work has been done. Let's take, Jack in the Box or Apple or all sorts of has been done. It's sort of bold, not like the ads around it. There's a lot of things that the best advertising does that people don't copy.
Well, it gets back to the ideology of a typical client who, they have bosses to report to, and they have staff, and they are by nature not risk takers. They're not going to get fired for making a safe choice. And then there's tons of research, and everyone has the same research that say, well, we know our consumer likes this and this and this and this, and therefore it makes sense to do this. And everyone has the same research, and so everyone comes to the same conclusion. But again, a customer can't have a preference if they don't see a difference. And
yeah. I love that quote. That's on your website, isn't it? Which I thought that these things look so easy and obvious when you read them like that, but that's one of the best ways I've seen that written, which is just seems because it's unarguable. People can't have a preference if they can't see a difference, and which is also an argument for doing work that feels different.
Yeah,
obviously, as well as pointing out the difference with this product and that product.
Yeah, especially if you're a challenger brand, and you don't have the budget to make people see your work. So yeah, I think differentiation is absolutely essential, and you have to fight the client's instinct for use of best practices and doing what's been done before.
So on Joe Isuzu, Rick, how, like a lot of the best work, that looks like you would knock those out in an hour and then go to the pub. You just have fun, have a laugh. It must have been harder than that. Was it hard doing those scripts, or did you knock them out in an hour, think of 2 or 3 lies, string them together? How was that working on it? It just looks so fun and easy. I'm sure it wasn't, but
yeah, well, I think it wasn't that hard. Once you have an overarching idea, like we're going to give all the rational information people need, miles per gallon and the price and 0 to 60 time or whatever. So we're going to provide them all the rational information they need, and we're just going to do it by saying, something totally exaggerated that's obviously a lie. So it's a really easy umbrella to work under, and I think we just spent a lot of time with our feet up on our desk thinking about funny places for this to happen. So no, it wasn't that hard.
Do you think? Can you imagine that running today?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, because people are wary. People are still wary of advertising, and they don't believe advertising. So some, not that exactly, but some version of that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah. And what did you, when you were at Telefamina, what did you learn? What did you take away to your next agency from Jerry? Anything? What did you learn from him?
Well, I didn't have the best relationship with Jerry because his brand. Look, his name is on the door, and so
Yeah.
he is the brand, and he is the agency, and so he's going to promote him. Promoting himself and promoting the agency are the same thing when your name is on the door. And I would get a little. I didn't really like it that some guy who didn't come up with the idea is promoting it like he did come up with the idea. So I didn't love that.
Do you feel differently about that now than you did then, or would you feel similar? In the sense that obviously you now run your own agency and have done, and may have a different take on it than when you were younger.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, I don't have my name on the agency door, and I don't really do. I'm not active in social media. I don't promote myself. And as creative people, our work is our most valuable asset. And so to claim credit for something that we didn't do is, theft.
So, out of interest, why are you not on? Because we started, and I was saying it's interesting how few people in London know your name, although they would know some of your work.
Yeah.
And you saying that you're not on social media and you don't promote yourself and you avoid that, maybe one of the reasons. Why do you avoid that?
Well, I made a decision, for a couple of reasons. One, even when I started the agency in '97, I thought, I had a couple of thoughts. One was, I don't want to put my name on the door because someday I'm going to retire, and I want a smooth transition.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then the other thing is that at the time, agencies were still pretty much named like law firms.
Yeah.
And so I thought, again, the idea of differentiation. So I took that maybe a couple of steps too far because the name of the agency was the Kowloon Wholesale Seafood Company.
I know. I read that. That is a very bold move.
And so we had our office
deliberately throw people off.
Yeah. And
so presumably the receptionist would have to answer the phone, the Kowloon food.
Right. So I was trying to think of something that was as far away from what a traditional agency would be called, and it got us into. There was some confusion.
Do you not ever lay awake at night and think, I wonder whether Volkswagen phoned the lady, said the Kowloon Seafood Wholesale
Kowloon Wholesale Seafood Company?
Yeah, and then put the phone down and think, that's maybe the wrong. I was after Rick Sittig at the time. That's obviously wrong.
It was sort of okay. So I like the name Secret Weapon. Secret Weapon Marketing, not advertising, because I wanted to be in the marketing business, not the making of ads. And then I thought, well, the idea is that this agency will be behind the shadows, but our clients will be known. And so taking this a step further, I thought, well, if we're secret,
let's be secret.
We would have a false name. And so our office in Santa Monica we had giant red doors as an entry, and in Chinese letters, it said Secret Weapon Marketing, but it was the Kowloon Wholesale Seafood Company as you rode up the elevator and entered the office. And then it all changed from seafood into this, what I imagined the CIA must have looked like in 1955. So we had like aluminum walls with hidden doors and a trap, a palm a palm scanner at the entry on a trap door.
Excellent. A bit like Men in Black.
Yes, yes. And then there was a wall that rotated that revealed this like mahogany men's club with a fireplace and a bar and a pool table.
You actually did this?
Yes. And then in my office, I had a wall of steel filing cabinets, and if you all marked, with different tabs, but if you pulled on one, the whole, like half the wall opened up into this other secret room with the pool table and the bar and whatnot. And so it was fun. It was really fun. It was totally unnecessary, but it was fun.
Excellent. So I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to drag you back to the chronology of my notes. So after Della Femina, did you go to DDB Chicago?
No, I never worked at DDB Chicago. I was at DDB LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ever-Ready was LA.
Yes. Energizer was Chiat. Oh, okay. So that's an interesting story.
So go on. So you're with Jerry Della Femina. You then went to Chiat?
Yes. Yeah.
In the binocular building, as I would call it.
It wasn't the binocular building yet. It was, we called it the warehouse. So I won some local awards, and I think got the attention of Lee Clow. And so I remember my interview with him. And again, Lee was like Jesus. He looked like Jesus, and he was advertising Jesus. And so he's very very relaxed and very friendly, and he just asked me, "Why do you want to work here?" And I remember that Adweek magazine had just totally critiqued a campaign for Nissan, a new campaign for Nissan, and they said it was really shitty. And so I told Lee, I said, I want to make those assholes at Adweek eat their words. I had such respect for the agency and the people who would work there, and I was serious. I'm like, I'm going to make those assholes eat their word, because that wasn't fair. And so
you sound quite intense then. So you meant that? That wasn't being ironic. You totally into it.
And I meant it. I had, by that time I had, studied the work of Chiat and all the great Apple work and Nike work, and people like Penny Capassus, who started off as a receptionist and then became one of the top writers in the industry. And I revered those people. And I thought, man, these assholes at Adweek, that can't stand.
And was the campaign built for the human race?
Yeah, it was the engineer. Yeah, it was the engineers sitting around the table. I mean, it was different. They took a chance. But I just thought that the insult against the agency was uncalled for. Snarky.
So that's interesting to me, how passionate you obviously were and focused.
Well,
which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I felt,
because obviously you were very driven and focused and energized.
Yeah, I mean, if you, imagine you having like a favorite football player or a favorite author or a favorite band, and a critic goes, I don't like it. You defend them.
And obviously you had enough confidence to, basically the implication is, I'll do work on it that will make them change their mind, which is obviously quite bold as well.
Yeah, well, I meant it.
So, and how did that go? How did he respond to that? Obviously, you got the job, so he must have responded pretty
I think
well.
he just smiled. He smiled, and then while I was there, I figured out. We traditionally work in teams of writer and art director, and I did that to some extent. But at first I was just on my own, and um, and I said, no, it's okay. I don't need a partner. I'm cool. I'm good. And but the truth was is that I knew that Lee was an art director, and he
Right.
didn't have a partner, and so I just calculated
Jeez.
that if I were a writer of kind of floating around, that there would probably be
Coming.
opportunities where Lee needed a writer, and well, I
Yeah.
would be there.
And were you one of or the only loose writer there?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I did.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I had there's a while I had a partner named Andy Dijak, um,
Yeah.
and but um, I I thought I would love to work with Lee, and so I
Yeah.
did what I could to try to make myself available.
So again, you're obviously very confident at that period in what you can do to go into. Would you think Chiat was the best agency when you went there? That was probably the best agency in America.
I think I think I think it was Chiat and Fallon McElligott
Yeah.
and Goodby uh,
Right.
and Wyden and Kennedy. I think were all sort of in that top tier.
Yeah. So, and how did that feel? Was there a change in atmosphere, in process, in anything going from Della Femina to Chiat?
Well, the expectations I think were higher. It felt like um, it just felt like going from maybe the minor leagues to a major league, and expectations were higher. There were more teams to compete against, vying to get their work produced, and Lee set the bar really high for expectations. And Jay Chiat was also a very he was a guy who believed in shaking up convention, and so all the atmosphere was, and we worked in a crazy ass building, and so all the conditions were there to do something that gets attention and works and gets noticed. So that was, the energy was definitely different.
So, did you work longer hours or differently
Yeah,
or more intensely? You put in more hours to try and compete with
yeah,
the
and
higher grade of people.
yeah, I loved it. When you're young, you've got a crappy apartment, and um, so I was bummed when it was Friday and I couldn't get back to work until Monday, because
Right.
the agency was filled with young people, and they fed you, and it was awesome. So why would I want to go back to my crappy little apartment?
Yeah. So, what was the first bit of work that got you on the radar of Jay and Lee? Do you think that, because obviously you start like all creatives, that whenever they start somewhere new, getting their first piece of work out that they're happy with is a big deal.
Yeah. So I was working on the Nissan was our largest client, and there was a new category of vehicle being launched called an SUV, and so theirs was called a Pathfinder, and it's basically a two-door truck, and so they wanted to launch this, and I suggested that we take this truck and we actually drive it from Chicago to Rio de Janeiro and shoot it along the way and create a campaign of spots. We'd hire a couple, a husband and wife who were doing the journey, and every week put a new commercial on and new print ads that showed how they were doing and what they were up to. and not fake it. Let's actually do it. And so that I think Jay and Lee really responded to. I wish it had been done in the internet era.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I wasn't aware of that work at the time. Partly I was thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
But having rediscovered it recently, it seems so of today. There would be a whole, content piece and social media piece that would fall out of that. It feels like it was done yesterday.
Yeah.
And presumably that was before the internet.
Oh yeah.
That'd be way before the internet. So that must have been very different at the time. But also, it must have been very different.
Well, so at the time, we were trying to do a campaign in real time. We were shooting 16 millimeter, very minimal crew, and it took 6 weeks. And every week there'd be a new commercial on the air, and there'd be a new ad in Time magazine, and they were spread ads that looked like handwritten diaries.
Yeah, I've got those. They're great. Yeah.
With Polaroids and things. And so that was as current as we could be. But the idea of, so SUVs were a new phenomenon, and we had a pretty good idea that no one was going to actually take this vehicle off-road. But the romance and the idea of being able to do that was super attractive. So I would say that work was.
And so, were you on the shoot, or were you at the office writing the ads for the shoot, or did you do them on the shoot? How did you?
Yeah, no, I was on the shoot. We had the crew. We got to know each other very well because we were, we had like dysentery, and we're kind of hanging off the back of the truck while it's moving, and we're chased by native people who thought we were stealing their soul, and we were chased. We had guys with machetes chasing us.
Oh my God, what an experience!
We were handing out bribes to police in Mexico to let this caravan go through. There was a civil war and a shooting war in Nicaragua. And so we hired a C-130 transport plane and shot the Pathfinder. We showed everything,
Amazing.
And then we drove through. We were trying to meet up with a primitive tribe in the Amazon, and we were in a restaurant talking about this, and the guy, I swear to God, the guy at the next table said, "You want to meet the Indians?" I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I used to work. I've just been fired, but I used to work for the government, like a liaison to them. And I can take you there. And so we some of us helicoptered into the middle of the Amazon, and the rest of the crew drove in on the Pathfinder. And these people had never seen Westerners before. And that was amazing. We were, And while we were there for 3 days. We couldn't make eye contact with the women. We bathed in the river. We everything that we brought in, we took out with us.
What an experience!
Oh my God! And so while we were there, the chief's wife was pregnant, and she started hemorrhaging, and she was gonna die. And so we offered through our translator to put her on the helicopter, and the nearest clinic was 500 miles away. And so the chief agreed, but he had to go up in the helicopter first because no one in that tribe had ever been above tree level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we took him up, and then he gave us permission to take his.
And how did he react to that, being above tree level, flying around?
Giant grin. just amazing. And so we saved the Chiefs. We saved her life and the baby, and so then they like in celebration they painted our faces with clay, and they served us this drink, if you can call it that. They would manioc root and mash it up in their mouths with their teeth and spit it into a bowl and let it ferment for a day. And then we would drink it. Yeah. Yeah. So it was
smile on.
Yeah, it was incredible. Incredible.
Wow, what an amazing! So that wasn't the campaign that then became Adweek's Campaign of the Year, was it? That's too perfect to say. So I read that, which is the most amazing thing. Let me just look at my notes. That you got Adweek's Campaign of the Year 3 years running.
Yeah, it was actually. I think it was Advertising Age, different magazine.
Right. Okay, not Adweek.
But it was, it was the best. I did win that 3 years in a row for 3 different campaigns, and
it's unbelievable. That must have that must have gone to your head and affected you in a bad way.
At the time, I think it has now, but at the time, I didn't really understand. I just thought that I'd done some work.
Yeah, that seems normal. Campaign of the Year again for me. That's just normal. We just keep rolling.
Yeah. So I didn't really appreciate it at the time.
So what would they have been? Was that the first Pathfinder campaign? Joe Isuzu?
Yeah, I think it was. I think one was Nissan, a fantasy campaign for Nissan, and then I think one was Energizer Bunny. Yeah, and then I think maybe the Road to Rio. Yeah.
So what did you do next? Energizer Bunny at China?
Pretty much. Yeah. So Energizer was at Doyle Dane, and they had created this. The campaign was this pink toy bunny, and they would do these side-by-side tests and show that the Energizer powered rabbit lasted longer than other toys. And so, so Energizer had a review, and Shyatt was invited to the review, and thinking about what we can do. And batteries are not super sexy products to do advertising for. The only thing, no one thinks about batteries until their flashlight doesn't work. And so the only thing people care about is how long does it last. And traditionally, the way you show something lasting is through like time lapse. See this toy, it's running, and now it's 24 hours later and it's still running, but the competitor has stopped. Yeah. And it's all based on time lapse stuff to demonstrate the length of power. And so I thought, well, if it really lasts a long time, it lasts so long that you couldn't demonstrate that in one commercial because it would keep going. And so I thought, well, what if it goes so long that it runs into the next commercial that has nothing to do with Energizer? It's a coffee commercial, or it's a whatever commercial. And so that became the campaign of we created this bunny, and it was, and so I think if you go to Wikipedia, you'll see like people claim that Doyle Dane came up with the idea for the bunny, which is technically true. There was a bunny, but that's the campaign that got them fired. And so what we did was we took the concept of a battery operated bunny and and there was a certain, I have to admit, there was a certain amount of delight in winning an account by taking their icon and then completely repurposing it.
So what made you take their icon if it hadn't done very well previously? If it wasn't a famous icon before?
Well, the idea of we needed something to demonstrate the length of use, and so
Yeah.
so
And that was in existence.
yeah, and so and so we wanted, batteries aren't very memorable, so we added this, him beating a drum with the word Energizer on it. So there would be, the client couldn't have any reservation about wondering if this was being branded or would be.
Yeah.
And it just made him, it served our purposes because it made it more noticeable, or obnoxious every time he interrupted someone else's commercial.
Well, it's interesting you say obnoxious, because that's what when I went back to it, I'd forgotten how how good it was, because since then it's been used in very bland, tame ways.
Yeah.
So it's such a perfectly obnoxious thing to come marching and banging annoyingly into the next commercial. And also, I'd not taken in, I looked at him slightly more closely. I know he had shades on. I didn't realise he was wearing flip-flops.
Yeah. I mean,
it was that, how did that, why were they there?
Just personality,
Yeah.
Just for personality. But the other thing is that for a battery demonstration, we thought, oh, this campaign's only going to get better over time, because a year from now, he's still going. And that was the copy, still going, nothing outlasts the Energizer. And 5 years from now, 10 years. And so here we are, 31 years later. Now the current campaign is kind of, taking all the fun out of it, but that was also built into it, was this campaign only proves itself more. It doesn't get old. The
longer it goes.
Yeah, it just keeps proving itself.
Excellent. So you also worked on Reebok, which again was it was interesting, because I remember the tennis ball face, which must have been an unbelievable challenge to try and make in 1990. What was that, one?
Yeah.
So again, that's quite bold at that point to draw that and think, yeah, we should be able to figure out how to put faces on balls that are moving around. This is pre, digital. So, how did you do that? That was great, though.
I don't know. It took a lot of, today it would be a few keystrokes. Yeah. But back then, the mad scientists had to go into the lab and figure out a way to superimpose that frame by frame and rotoscope it. And, yeah.
It's still, I mean, even though it's old, it's still pretty well done, particularly unbelievably well done for the time. But even now, it's not bad. And also an ad that I discovered that I also hadn't seen at the time, which I loved. And it's one of those things, I knew I loved it because I was thinking, I wish it was longer. I wish it was much longer, which was the tennis ad playing God.
Yes.
And that seems such an unusual thought.
That might be my favorite ad that I've done.
That you've ever done?
Yeah. So
how did that go? I was just thinking, that's such an unusual. So the brief is, I guess that was at the start of those rackets, that all of it that I can remember thinking, God, they look freaky, those things with the big heads. All of a sudden you've got seemingly twice as much space.
Right.
And rather than compare it to the normal racket, you compare it to like a racket where it's the size of a barely bigger than a tennis ball with God playing on it. How does that come about?
Yeah, so the client was Prince Tennis Rackets, and you're right. That was an era where the prevailing wisdom is that the larger the racket, the larger the sweet spot and so the greater probability that someone could get a good shot. And so if you were and so these rackets, were aimed at recreational players, and a recreational player needs a really big sweet spot to be able to play well or play better. And so we thought, well, if a recreational sort of novice player needs a really big racket, what a really talented person would not. And so I thought, what would God's tennis racket play like? What would it look like? Because he would be flawless. He would have incredible power and precision and never mishit a ball. I bet God has a tennis racket that's about 4 inches in diameter. And so that's what we did. We said, all right, well, let's have somebody play God. And so the premise is that, you are going to benefit greatly from from power and size of the new, Prince oversized racket. And we, showed a guy sort of unsheathing that racket on a court. And then we said, God, on the other hand, has, amazing power and infinite accuracy. And so he only needs this racket. So we had them play. And so they're rallying back and forth. And the guy with the Prince racket, God comes to the net, and the guy with the Prince racket passes him. God lunges for it and falls. And as God is picking himself up, the guy he's playing with says something like, "Nice try." And God in return mutters, "Lucky shot." And just then the guy has a heart attack and falls to the ground. And the end product shot is the racket next to his feet.
Dead body.
Yeah.
And did that sail through the client and research, if there's such a thing at the time?
Yeah. Because, if you think about it, it's very disciplined. What I find is that if you're disciplined about the strategy, it gives you great license to do whatever you want creatively. It's when you, in the name of creativity, stray from the strategy that things don't work out. And so our brief was, draw attention to this oversized racket that will help your game.
Because of the sweet spot.
Yeah, because of the size.
Visually, having such a small, it seems so odd to me to think, right, let's have him playing someone who's got a racket with a small head, who's really, really great at tennis.
Yeah.
God, is the leap, But you're right that because it comes so closely from getting because you can see that small sweet spot, it brings attention to the other one on the racket. And that's what I noticed about lots of your work on, without looking at it from more of a distance. I think, it's all funny and unusual and whatever. But then when I go through it, it's a bit like when I interviewed Jerry Graff, and he talked through the thinking behind things like Skittles and various other things. And he talked through it like a strategist, not like we thought it'd be really funny to have a sheep with a man's head or this thing or that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was very carefully worked out. And I think when we get on to Jack in the Box, which is the same, in a way, you take in all these very, very funny ads that couldn't be better branded because the logo is there, every frame. But even the way it's introduced, that they blew up the thing last time,
Mm-hmm.
It went wrong. I think it was an E. coli outbreak, wasn't it,
Yeah.
that killed people.
Yep.
So even the ways, the very ways introduced is like a really smart business thing of, like, the founders come back. In a way, it's so businessy, but it comes over as very light, enjoyable, which it is. But so it's an interesting mashup of those things to me, going back, revisiting it.
Well, you're right. It was intentional. Jack in the Box did have a tragedy. They had E. coli tainted meat, kill customers, which is something that you wouldn't expect to recover from. And so, if you, the thought is that if you ignore it, your business, they go into bankruptcy. And if you come out and the CEO, looks into the camera and apologizes and says that they're committed to food safety and nothing is more important than the welfare of our customers. Well, that's not good, because it's going to make people ask, weren't you always committed to food safety? And it just prompts more inquiry. Well, what are you doing now that's different than what you did a month ago? And that's not a road that is going to be beneficial. But there's sort of a midpoint where you acknowledge what happened, but you do it in a lighthearted way that doesn't invite more inquiry. So you can't. So Jack is there basically to say, we're under new management and I'm shaking things up. But the Los Angeles Times can't interview Jack and go, well, Mr. Box, what are your plans? What are you doing differently?
You've got to say for yourself.
Right.
I think also that there must have been a slight worry at the time with the client that how far away from the E. coli incident was it? A year or so?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got, I think it was 6 deaths I read, which is obviously a difficult issue. So on the one hand, they must have gone through their mind. They're coming back a sort of a year later, blowing up the last guys for killing those 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a big clown's head on, and he says, oh, they messed up, so I'm blowing them up, and let's carry on. They must have thought, is that going to look too like they're not taking it seriously or too lighthearted? And obviously, as it turned out, obviously it worked great for them. Was that in the discussions and the tone of it? Should we do that? Most clients, I would have thought, wouldn't do that.
So like I mentioned before, when a company is in dire straits and risks going out of business, they are more open to risk. And so we acknowledged that things were going to be different. The founder was coming back to make things right. And that's something that people understand. Oh, okay, new management. Even though it was done in a fictitious way, they were willing to believe it, but not in such a serious way that it would provoke real questions. And so it did work. Yeah.
And was that part of a pitch that you won that as a pitch, or was that an account that you were given?
No, that was so they fired their agency, and it was down to us at Chiat, and I think Young and Rubicam. And Young and Rubicam had pitched some, I think, like Little Richard playing piano and singing songs about juicy this and tasty that. And, we came in with the unconventional approach, and because they had to.
But what you're doing is very grounded in business, isn't
yes.
it? How do you persuade people to give it another try? The founders come back, although it's wrapped up in this funny, unusual, sort of crazy. Well, not crazy is not the right word, but it's very bound in the underlying thing is, or maybe the founder's back and these things have been addressed. Well, he is addressing them in the ads, isn't he? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, a founder's campaign is actually fairly routine. We have people all the time, founders of companies, who speak about the importance of whatever it is that they're doing. So so that people were accustomed to seeing. We just did it with a completely farcical founder, but who who didn't take his job farcically. He didn't realize that he had a giant clown head or that he was weird. We never really drew attention to that. He just conducted. Actually, Richard Branson was kind of our model. Like, we're going to make him the celebrity CEO, and we're going to go see the behind the scenes, what his life is like, running a company, having a family, going on vacation, going to conventions, traveling, whatever. And the joke really isn't about the head, and no one ever really comments on the head, which is also this nice.
Which is a funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there's two aspects to it that I think I have to a confession here, which is that me and my partner Sean used to absolutely, when they first come out, we used to, I don't know where we would have got them. What would that be? 97-ish?
95. Yeah.
Was it 95 that early? So we had those on a tape and we used to watch them a lot. And then a couple of years later, we're at an agency called BMP, and we had a brief on something. And I've only done this once. And the logo was a purple circle with two eyes on it. And one of the campaigns we did was that as a head, I have to confess. And it came out terribly. It really came out terribly. So it really made me think, well, why is it so bad? A, we shouldn't have done it. And but B, the voice in particular, which is obviously turns out to be your voice, seemed to, I can't really put my finger on why that seemed so good. Obviously, I didn't know that was your voice at the time. So we used to watch those, particularly the one I can remember where you or him is chasing the guy who's bad mouthed.
Yeah.
And it looks like a bit of documentary film from Cops or something or whatever.
Yeah, it was meant to look like the show Cops.
Yeah. And it's a sort of mashup of it's very real. Your voice isn't, I don't know, there's something about it that seemed really good, and the fact that nobody's taken any, he's sort of being serious, but he's got this big clown's head. Nobody seems to be taking any notice of that. And all the ingredients that are in that, we couldn't figure out in retrospect. We're thinking, well, why did our one seem so bad? I mean, obviously, there's a whole number of reasons why that may be. But also the other thing is, I noticed from the drawings that you sent that Lee Clow had done, I think. Was that part of the redesign of him? Because obviously he looks different from the original clown's head.
Yeah.
Just the things like the quirky little hat on an angle and his expressions, they're sort of subtle, all these things, but they really have a big impact, I think. Particularly as obviously he's got no expressions. I know on some of them, his mouth, you may cut his mouth again and it's a squiggle and then it's a different shape. But more or less, he's expressionless.
Yeah. So that was, you're right. The original Jack Clown logo had been around since, I think, 1951. And so it had changed a little bit over time. And so for the campaign, we streamlined it a little bit and simplified it. The fact that his expression was fixed and analog was intentional, because we had the technology to obviously have him do whatever we wanted, but we just thought it was funnier that, and there was lots of advertising that was taking advantage of digital effects. And so we thought, well, this is just another way to stand out. He'll be a completely analog, expressionless, creature who, has a wife and a dog and does, just normal, drives a car, and says all these things. And then we occasionally, but rarely, would put a new mouth on him just for a shot. And because we did it so sparingly, it was sort of, funny and shocking to see it.
Yeah. My partner I spoke to earlier, said I was interviewing you later, said about that ad. He said, I remember that was really funny because the chase was unintentionally long. It didn't need to be that long, but it just seemed to go on forever, which just seemed even funnier because it didn't need to be that long.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, was that an intentional? I think that is a longer ad, isn't it? Is that a 60
Yeah,
second?
there's a 60 and
Yeah,
there's a 30, and we were
right.
just trying to mimic Cops, uh,
Okay.
the TV show Cops, and that was handheld, and it was pretty much one take, and
Yeah.
we swapped out in the tussle. Jack pins this guy up against the wall in his own home, and the guy breaks free, and in that moment where he breaks free, the stuntman Jack comes in from underneath the camera, and he's wearing a soft helmet, a foam helmet that's open in the front, so he can actually see as he chases the guy. And when he tackles him, he'd break his neck if he was wearing that hard fiberglass helmet. So, and then in the tackle, we cut and get the other Jack back in there. But that was just pride. It's on strategy because the message is very conventional. I'm the founder. I've made changes to my product. I'm really proud of the changes. They're really delicious, and you should try it. That's very conventional. We just made how that happened unconventional.
Well, also the other thing I noticed, I can't remember. Does he call it a jerk in the box or something? I can't remember what the
he calls it junk in the box.
Junk in the box. Okay, he's sort of heard that and tracking him down. But what I noticed is it's interesting. My memory is seeing this one, maybe the Philly one where they've got the wigs or whatever, and it's funny. Mm-hmm. But when I go back to now, it so clearly tells you a product point, sort of in a way that we don't really do in England so much. People are a bit ashamed to be so transparently, clearly say this is delicious lettuce with this thing and that thing. So for example, I saw which I thought was really funny, the one with the dad, where he's the dad filming his son. Yeah. He's really proud, and his son's saying, but he delivers the product point. I can't remember what it was, but my dad wants me to talk, may hope that I talk about the delicious patty thing with a delicious crispy lettuce thing. So he goes through all that product thing and then says, but he's a vegetarian.
Yeah, he goes, when I grow up, I want to be a vegetarian. And then...
And he sits down all embarrassed in his big head as if he could hide anyway, which is funny.
Yeah, and then the kid, he's like at a school assembly, and the parents are there, and he's talking about how how proud he is, but he wants to be a vegetarian, which crushes Jack and his wife, and then he goes on to explain that he wants to be a vegetarian because he likes animals and he wants to help them.
Yeah. He wants to help those little animals. Yeah. So why, Rick, of all the billions of people in the world, did you choose your voice?
Oh, that's a great question. I tried so hard not to. I put out a casting call. I listened to easily. I mean,
what were you looking for before you chose yours? How would you have cast him?
Well, I swear, other than doing one line in an Energizer spot, the launch spot, I had never done voiceover, and so I don't know what we were looking for, but I listened to about 250 auditions, and narrowed it down. There was one guy named Jay Thomas who he's on the radio, a little bit of television, kind of a stand-up comic, and we were looking for someone who could, understand the character and get the timing and the nuance of the lines in the comedy, and so I told Jay Thomas that he was our recommend, and so he was pretty happy about that because he understood the financial implications of being the voice of a company. And so I brought that recommendation to the client, and they're like, why don't you just do it? I'm like, what? Like, I had pitched the campaign, and as I pitched it, I would say, and then Jack says this, and then Jack says that, and so they just got used to hearing me as Jack. And my producer said, "Yeah, you should definitely do it. You know the timing, you know the intent of the writing. Why don't you just do it?" And so, the client pretty much insisted. So then I had to go back to Jay Thomas, and Jay had said before, he goes, I was up for a voice, to be the voice of the company once before, about 5 years ago, and it turned out the goddamn creative director of the agency became the voice. I'm like, oh shit.
Oh, wow.
And so I sent him this giant basket of fruit and wine and cheese. And I said, I'm sorry, they've gone with somebody else. Yeah. And I, you can't, I couldn't be objective about my own voice. But I did know that whoever's voice it was probably going to work, because repetition over time makes people say, well, that's his voice. Of course, that's his voice. So, but I was always available, unlike an actor. Who might
and you knew the intent of what you were delivering. Yeah. I mean, we saw it and really liked the voice. And I don't know, I was trying to think why now. It didn't seem expected.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you were delivering the funny parts correctly. I don't know. I don't know. It's something about the combination of the head, the voice, and obviously what was going on that seemed sort of perfect. It's interesting that was a sort of accident in a way. Did you get paid separately for the voice as well? Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah. And I mean, it worked out. It worked out for me, but it also worked out for the client, because I was always available, and I had no conflicts. So, with another actor, you might have heard,
of course, yeah.
Him doing a soap commercial or a beer commercial, and that would have diluted it. So I was exclusive to Jack in the Box, I was happy to do that, and it was a good.
So it is quite distinctive. I mean, every now and again you say something, and it instantly, sounds, obviously for a good reason. It's you. It sounds like Jack in the Box, but it's quite unusual. I mean, I'm not American, so I can't quite place where and why, but it does sound it's easy to identify to me. And then obviously when that moved on, they've got a new voice, which I can't really adjust to.
Well, they hired a sound-alike. They hired someone to try to sound like which I,
Oh, that's supposed to sound like you.
Yeah.
It seems like a completely different vibe to me.
Well, you know what? I can't complain. It was a good 20-year ride.
Wow. Yeah. So you do that at Chiat. You've done all that stuff. How did you come to leave Chiat?
So in 97, maybe late 96, Taco Bell came to Chiat. I think based on the turnaround that we did for Jack in the Box, and said, we'll give you. You don't even have to compete for it. We'll give you the Taco Bell account. But of course, you'd have to lose Jack in the Box, because that's a fast food conflict. And Taco Bell was, 3 or 4 times the size of Jack in the Box in terms of budget. And so Chiat said goodbye to Jack in the Box to take Taco Bell. And then Jack in the Box approached me and said, open an agency, we'll be your first client.
Oh, wow. So you weren't backed by Chiat. That just went and happened naturally. Yeah. Amazing. So did you have any worries about doing that? I guess not. It's a reasonable piece of business.
Well, at the time, sure, because you go from being someone who's just focused on writing and directing and doing creative things to someone who's now employing people and paying utility bills and rent and salaries and insurance and 401k plans, and like, holy crap. And in the beginning, there were just four of us. There were four people in the agency, and I was the only creative person. So I was doing everything from writing TV scripts to writing what would be on the napkin that you got handed at the drive-through. So it was very, very bare bones. And that led to something else, which was a philosophy about how we were going to bill. And, most agencies build like law firms. They bill by the time. They bill by time. And we couldn't bill by time because there was four of us. And so what we're going to we can't charge, $27,000 an hour, So we just developed we went back to an older idea of we just bill as a percentage of media and production. And that way, exactly what it's going to cost. And there are no arguments. There's no making a presentation, the client not being happy and having to tell them, we can go back and do more, but you need to sign this overage, which caused attention. And so we just stuck with that. And clients loved knowing how much they were going to spend each year on advertising and never having to have an awkward discussion about more fees for more time.
So I was going to ask whether clients liked or disliked that, because obviously most agencies are set up they get paid more if they do it wrong, because you keep going again and getting paid for getting it wrong each time.
Yeah. Well,
clients were positive about the percentage route.
Yeah, my experience is that they love it. If we can come up with they want the certainty of knowing what it's going to cost, and they don't really care if you spend 10 minutes or 100 days. They're paying. They're not paying for your time. You can't pay for my time and say, I want you to come over and paint my garage. You're paying for advertising, for marketing. You're paying for intellectual property. So that seemed to make sense. And then the other thing,
do you still do that today, Rick?
What's that?
Do you still bill in the same way?
Absolutely.
You do? Amazing. Yeah. Well, then there are two things that people have talked about but haven't done that you seem to have done. And the other is to have a philosophy of only having 3 clients.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Well, so here's something, that I've learned over time is that there's 2 fundamental ways of running an agency as a business. There may be more, but it's broadly broken down into this. You can grow an agency by growing accounts, which is, I think, the approach most agencies take. And so, if you have 10 accounts and you can win accounts 11 and 12, that's growth for the agency. But it's not good for the original 10 accounts because they just got diluted. So it's not in their best interest. And the other thing is that if you're concentrating on winning new accounts, you might be doing work to attract attention to win those accounts that may not be in the best interest of your existing accounts. And so I was never comfortable with that. And so by limiting, so I decided if I'm going to grow when the clients grow, so that our objectives are aligned. And clients like that. They like knowing that they're not going to be diluted. And they like that the work that you're doing is in their best interest because we only grow when they grow.
Yeah.
And that's,
Do you know anyone else who's done that?
I don't know of anyone else who's done that.
Because it makes so much sense. Also, I've heard lots of people talk about that, that we should limit ourselves to a certain amount of clients, or we should do this, or we should bill different ways. But I don't know people have actually done it.
Well, so here's another example of the need for differentiation. And it's ironic that ad agencies, who generally believe in the idea of differentiation, all go about their business in a very similar fashion.
Yeah.
So we had a stretch of, I'm going to say 12 or 14 years where we won every account that we pitched. And it's a combination of, we had really nice case studies to show, and they liked the differentiation of being one of 3 clients, and they liked that our fees were attached to their success, and there's also a little bit of a reverse psychology going on, because most pitches, the agencies are falling all over themselves to see what they can do to win the account. And when you only have 3, if you only have 1 opening, the clients are wondering if they can get on the list. So we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us. And that's another differentiator.
Yeah, amazing. Also, they're more likely to stick with you, which means you're more likely to do longer campaigns.
Yes.
Which is more valuable for them. Because also it's interesting, Jack in the Box. How long did Jack in the Box run for?
Well, it's still running today. It's a little...
Yeah, it's still running, or Energizer.
But so that ran from 94. So it's been running 26 years. Energizer has been running for 31 years. Southern California Honda is in its that's my current client. That's 14 years. And that's all. I don't want to give away too many secrets, but that's also part of our pitch, is that a lot of advertising is just the search for the next shiny object. And every quarter, you're kind of figuring out what that is. And that's when advertising becomes an expense. It's just, what do we need to spend to create the shiny object for this quarter? But if you build a campaign that's designed to run over time, you're building an asset. It switches from being an expense to an asset. It's like the difference between, if you can rent an apartment for 20 years, and it's just an expense. But if you can buy a house and sit on it for 20 years, that's an asset.
Yeah.
So we try to do campaigns that become assets and not expenses.
So at what point did you start directing too? So with Jack in the Box, you're writing, art directing, creative directing, voiceover, and directing. That's 5 jobs. I might have missed one. Maybe there's...
No, I think that's it.
Is that just it? Is the limit of 5? So when did you think I would be better off doing these myself?
Well, so we're looking for someone to direct, and the exec producer, Jennifer Golub at Chiat, said, "Why don't you do it?" Like, I don't really know much about cameras, and And she said, "You don't have to. You just have to. You have the vision. You know what you want. You can see the final product in your head. You just need to be able to convey that to everyone else in the crew. And you know the vision. So why don't you direct it?" And so Chiat was. They were willing to let me do that. They had about 50 people on set the first shoot, because it was super, I'd been to a lot of shoots, but I'd never directed one. And so, your first shoot, you feel a little self-conscious when you say things like, and action.
Yeah.
For a kid who grew up in a small town in the Midwest, it felt like, a movie about making a movie.
And did you adjust to it okay? Did you take to it quite quickly, or was it a little bit? It's a very different skill.
I think the best advice I got was that you don't have to know everybody else's job. You just have to have a clear vision and be able to communicate that vision to every department, to the producers and DP and gaffers, and so I feel comfortable. I could see the finished product in my head, so I felt comfortable in describing it to the crew and the team. And then also, for Jack in the Box, a lot of it was directing talent and comedy and casting. Casting for comedy dialogue is 95% of the game. And so I took to casting, I think, pretty naturally. And I think I had a pretty good ear for comedic performance and timing and pauses and, little nuances.
And is there any of the directors you would have worked with previously? I mean, I'm sure they all input in some way that you would have taken more from, because you worked with an amazing array of directors before you were doing it yourself. Did any influence you more than others?
The directors that I worked with were, at the risk, I don't want to pass up somebody or offend somebody. I think I was inspired by Cliff Freeman, Freeman Agency. Those were incredibly funny spots. And
Settlemeyer?
You know what? I was just about to say Joe Settlemeyer. Now, maybe I might be the only guy. Is it Nick Anderson, the director? Shoot. I'm blanking on his name, but it looks like he's copied Settlemeyer. All the right angles.
Oh, really?
I'll think of it later. Shoot. Well, anyway, so the answer to your question, no, I just felt like not really. I would say Settlemeyer for his sort of deadpan instincts, and also I think he's a really good example of the idea that comedy happens at right angles and drama happens at acute angles, off center.
Sorry, you're going to have to explain it. Comedy happens at right angles.
Yeah. So comedy happens. Now, of course, anytime you make a generalization, there are exceptions to it. But in general, comedy happens at 90-degree angles. You see somebody head on, or you see somebody from the side, and the action happens from left to right or right to left in the frame.
Interesting.
Drama happens at 45-degree angles. You look at someone's face on a long lens, and you half see them, and take a look the next time you watch comedy or drama and see at the angles. Check out the angles.
It's absolutely right. Is that something you've read, heard, or come up with yourself? Because that sounds so true, and I've never read or heard of that.
I think I understood it. Like I had a sense for that, maybe just through repetition and kind of filing away. Funny stuff happens like that, and drama is different. But I think I read that, and when I read it, it was like, yes, that makes total sense to me.
Brilliant. I love that. I've not heard that.
Thank you.
That's all
All right. Well, I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate your homework. You've done research, and that takes effort, and you're quite good at it. So
Pleasure.
that's much appreciated.
No, pleasure. Well, I really appreciate the time. It's morning for you, which is obviously tougher to hang in there in the morning when you've got other things to do. All right. Thanks again,
Take
Rick.
care. I guess, are you off to the pub now or something?
I'm playing football in about 2 hours.
Sweet.
Uh, yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well,
Good. Have a good day. Thanks again, Rick. Really
take
appreciate it.
care. Bye bye.
All the best. Bye.